Good morning. As a Catholic and a biologist, I've had some unusual experiences in my life, and it's made me think about how we learn prejudice. Let me explain a little bit. I was born to a military family. We traveled all over the world, lived in Japan, Philippines, West Coast. But when I was 10 years old, my father decided that he would become the gentleman farmer and move to southern Illinois. It was a very conservative Protestant area. We were a Catholic family. We were the only Catholic family in my grade school. And it was really astonishing how much prejudice there was against my family being Catholic. Let me give you just some highlights. In 1960, there was an election. The first Catholic to become president of the United States was John Kennedy. Richard Nixon and John Kennedy were running against each other. And in the election day, on the way home, on the bus ride home, the 35 minutes that I was on the bus, 3 boys sequentially beat me up. Okay? The bus driver only stopped when it was my time to get off, and he said, "You got to let him get off the bus." It was pretty considerable. It was never a day in my family there was not some significant prejudice. My sister, in a sophomore home ec class in high school, her home ec teacher announced in class that you Catholics are 2 steps below the N-word. I have a younger brother, Tom, who had seizures during high school. And Tom one time had a seizure in the hallway. While the principal was looking, some kids poured soda on his pants to make it look like he'd urinated on himself. Nobody was punished. A teacher in school even called him slurs during class. To give you a sense of how violent it could have been at times, my brother Jim and I did baling for a contract baler, which means we basically hauled hay. Got paid about $1.25 an hour. When I was a senior in high school, we had worked for a particular farmer for 4 days, I think. And on the 4th day, we were really finishing up the last load of the hay. And apparently a neighbor called this farmer and said, "These 2 boys that are working on your farm are Catholic." I turn around with a bale of hay, one of the very last bales of hay on the wagon, and I'm starting to walk toward one of the sheds. And this man is standing with a 10-gauge shotgun about 15 feet away from me. And he says, "I'm going to blow you fish eaters to hell." That's actually what he said, something very close to that. My brain probably fried a little bit at that point. I didn't know what to say. My brother Jim was about 10 steps behind me. Fortunately, my boss, Art, an atheist, by the way, stepped in front of the shotgun, and he said, "Clyde, I'm not going to let you do that. You're going to have to shoot me first." He talked him down, and after about 5 minutes, we got on the tractor and blazed away as fast as we could. The summer after that, one of my coworkers tipped me off and told me, "John, there's a guy getting the gun because he found out you're Catholic." Jim and I buzzed off that time too, before the gun arrived, mercifully. That's just the highlights of what went on over those span of years that I was in high school. From high school, I went to a Methodist college. I was treated great. McKendree University, now McKendree University, then McKendree College, founded in 1828. I was the first non-Methodist to sit on the church-school relationship committee. As I said, I was treated great. When I was a senior, the chaplain of the campus came up to me and said, "John, I've asked Father Kastner to come and serve Mass on campus, and I said you'd be an altar boy." And I told him, I said, "I've never been an altar boy." He says, "Oh, don't worry, you'll be fine." So after 4 years of being treated really wonderfully at a progressive Methodist college, I moved away to teach. I began teaching in a German Catholic dairy farming community. It was a very rural district, very small high school. This district spanned over parts of 3 counties, and when I started, there were only 88 students in this little school. And the reason there were only 88 students is because this area was entirely Catholic. And there was a large Catholic high school that had been built, and if you were Catholic, you were supposed to send your children to this Catholic high school. I did not know this. I was working for the public school. The very first week that I worked for this public school, the agriculture teacher drove me home one day, and he drove me past the 2 families in this little city that were not Catholic. One of them, by the way, was Episcopalian, pretty close. You know, to say how Catholic this town was, the grade school in this little town was staffed by more than 50% nuns. Students in a public school all wore uniforms and they had catechism every morning. Okay, nobody objected. Okay, very Catholic area. However, as a Catholic working for the public school, I was considered one of the purple pagans. Our colors were purple and white. Okay, and one time I was introduced to the priest who was the head of the local Catholic school. I reached out my hand to shake his hand, and as people were explaining that I worked for the public school, he yanked his hand back, turned around, and walked away from me. Okay, this was the kind of nonsense that went on. I literally saw adult brother, fighting adult brother at times. And it wasn't just me affected by this. Let me give you an example. For 3 years, I rented an apartment from a wonderful lady whose son was the sheriff of the county. Obviously, I kept on my best behavior. But her husband had also run for sheriff about 20 years earlier. And the day that her husband had been elected sheriff, he had a massive heart attack and died. And there was a lot of campaign debts. They had some other bills going on, and this woman had never worked outside of the home during her lifetime. She had one son who was attending the Catholic high school, and a younger son who, unfortunately, that summer had been playing tag football out on the city green, broken his pelvis in 3 places, and was now had to be in a wheelchair for about 6 months. The Catholic high school that was about 8 miles away did not provide any special lift or bus service to get him to school. This woman couldn't afford the tuition of the Catholic high school, and she had to go to work at a retreat center about 50 miles away that she had to be at the job at 5 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so what she did is she sent her 2 sons to the local public school, which was only 3 blocks away. One son could push the other son's wheelchair over to this 1-story building. And because of this, the Archbishop in this diocese had decreed that any Catholic family that did not send their child to the Catholic high school was excommunicated. So this woman, who was a faithful Catholic, when I knew her, she went to Mass every day, she was retired, was now passed up on the communion rail. When this woman told me this story 20 years later, every time she told me this story, she broke down in sobbing tears. So I saw prejudice, Protestant against Catholic, Catholic against Catholic. Sometimes you see things, though, that make you think about why we have prejudice like this. It doesn't make any sense in some ways, but I had some clues and some insights from some of my experiences. Let me share one with you. In my senior year of high school, my father was really intent on me going to Southern Illinois University. The name of the team is the Salukis. It's an Egyptian dog. So he took me down to football games. And one time we were down at the homecoming game when I was a senior. The Southern Illinois Salukis were playing Western Michigan, I believe. They were beating them badly. I think it was like 27-0 or something, just close to the end of the first half. And the gentleman to my left had been a former lineman for the Southern Illinois team, and my father was to the right. And right before halftime, there was a tackle that went to the bench right in front of us, probably no more than 5 or 6 rows out from me right now today. And this fight broke out, and one of the Western Michigan players had knocked one of the Southern Illinois players to the ground. His helmet was off. He grabbed a metal water rack and started beating this grounded player without a helmet over his head with this metal water rack. Okay, obviously dangerous situation. The African-American gentleman to my left, who had been a former football player for the Southern Illinois Salukis, jumped up, pointed and said, "Look at that N-word beating on our black boy." My father, by the way, had a very volatile temper. He started to jump out of the stands. I tackled him, and fortunately the gentleman to my left also tackled him. We kept him from getting thrown out of the game. But that was sort of an interesting insight. I've had some other things happen. But let me explain that particular incident. As this gentleman, this African-American gentleman to my left, saw this particular scene, to him, his affinity was with his team, right? The Southern Illinois Salukis. Whatever would have been going on there, you know, they would have been the bad guys, and our guys would have been the good guys. And he expressed that as much. That's what he basically said. Okay, I had some other experiences like that. And when I was a junior in college, I took a philosophy class. And as I was learning philosophy, I began to think about these things. And I began to know more about biology. And as I put biology and philosophy together, I began to realize that to some extent, prejudice is an easily prepared behavior. This is a concept in biology. It doesn't mean instinct. It doesn't mean conditioned behavior. It means prepared behavior, something you can easily learn, like language. But let me give you an example. If you take a zoo-raised rhesus monkey and you toss some peanuts in its cage and then you throw a rubber snake in its cage, a zoo-bred rhesus monkey will happily walk right over the rubber snake, pick up the peanuts, and enjoy them. If you put a wild rhesus monkey into a cage, throw some peanuts in there, and toss a rubber snake in there, that wild-bred rhesus monkey will jump to the farthest end of the cage and scream in terror. If you put those two together, the zoo-bred and the wild-raised rhesus monkey, and you put the peanuts in the cage and throw a rubber snake in there, the wild-bred rhesus monkey will jump too far into the cage, and the zoo-bred rhesus monkey will follow suit. It very quickly, immediately learns, this is dangerous, stay away from it. Okay? In fact, if you even show a video to a zoo-bred rhesus monkey of the wild rhesus monkey doing that behavior, it learns it just like so. Okay? It's a prepared behavior. Interestingly, humans have the same kind of prepared behavior with snakes and spiders and things like that too. We tend to be very scared of them very easily. Okay? So we have this kind of prepared behavior, but you're thinking like, what does this connect with prejudice? Let me explain. Most of human existence, we have lived in small hunter-gatherer groups of 25 or less. And unfortunately, those hunter-gatherer groups probably didn't have similar communication skills, similar habits, maybe even look slightly different from one another. The interaction of those hunter-gatherer groups was not good. We know this from archaeological evidence. We also know this from studying indigenous tribes today. The Yanomami of the northern Amazon have been studied for many years, and the intertribal and extratribal homicide rates of Yanomami have varied from 20 to 80% of the males. 20 to 80%. Why? Because when they meet another tribe, it's not good. Bad things happen. They distrust each other inherently. And unfortunately, humans have had this sort of embedded sense of distrust toward groups that we haven't seen before, that we're not comfortable with, or we do not have an affinity with. And this is the challenge that we have, because humans have this very clearly enabled, prepared behavior for prejudice. So the question really becomes, how do we diffuse? How do we prevent this from becoming permanent? And I think it's pretty obvious. In these groups, 25 and less, starting as early as we can in schools and institutions and clubs and all the kinds of things that children go, we need to break up these groups. We need to create infinity groups that essentially are mixed by ethnic, cultural, racial, gender, religious preferences. All those kinds of things. Break these groups up. Let kids know from the earliest possible age that all these people are part of your group, a part of your clan, a part of your tribe. That will help diffuse this easily learned behavior. And probably one of the reasons TV commercials seem to be so dumb sometimes is because what they're trying to do is to get below a third grade reading level. And so we need to start before that third grade for sure. And we need to continue on through late adolescence, because behavior is set by the time largely set by the time you're in your mid-20s. So we need to do this starting early on and continue it all the way through. I think that's one of the ways in which we can really change the dynamic of something that's very easily learned. Sadly, prejudice is a behavior that's very easily learned, but it's not instinctive. And we can change this if we're intentional and thoughtful and do the things that will make a difference. Thank you.